Welcome to the Hope Unlocked podcast. I'm your host, Kristen Kurtz, and I'm also the founder of New Wings Coaching. I help and empower wild-hearted and adventurous women of faith feeling caged and stuck unlock their true purpose and potential, break free from limitations, and thrive with confidence, courage, and hope. If you're curious to learn more about coaching with me, head to newwingscoaching.net and be sure to explore the show notes for ways to connect with me further. Get ready to dive in as we uncover empowering keys and insights in this episode. So tune in and let's unlock hope together. Welcome to the Hope Unlocked podcast. I am Kristen Kurtz, your host. I pray this episode is like a holy IV of hope for your soul. Please help me welcome my sweet friend, Stephanie Page, to the show. I'm so excited for you guys to hear her story today. As we get started, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, it's so good to be here. My name is Stephanie Page, and I am a mom to 4 girls, and I am the co-founder and executive director of Stories Foundation, and we are an anti-human trafficking nonprofit. We do prevention work, awareness work, and then create sustainable resources and support for survivors and those vulnerable.
Mm-hmm. And I remember, I think it must have been, maybe 5, 6 years ago that I connected with you at a conference. I think that's where we might have met. And I was just so intrigued by the work that you do. What led you to, human trafficking? And like, was there something, that the Lord highlighted to you? Like, were you part of being trafficked? Tell us a little bit more of like, how did you end up on this road?
Yeah, human trafficking isn't part of my story personally. My background at the time was missions. My husband and I were full-time missionaries for the first 5 years of our marriage, and we'd been off the mission field for a couple years, and I was feeling restless about what God had for me. We were in a season of, little babies, and um, I was trying I'm entrepreneurial. I was trying a lot of different things, and nothing was really working. And I remember praying and telling God, you're the provider. You said you provide for all my needs according to your riches and glory. And so I will you do that, please? Kind of like, I don't know, an ultimatum, which,
Mhm.
God can hold that, right? He's so gracious. And
Yeah.
it was a moment of surrender for me for sure. And then it was a week later that I was on a road trip with my mom and dad. We are going to go to a wedding of a family friend, and my mom got a free book on her Kindle called Passport Through the Darkness, and it was about human trafficking. And she was reading it out loud, and I remember thinking that I couldn't believe these kinds of things were still happening in
Mhm.
the world. And I remember praying, like, Lord, this is not okay. Something has to be done. And he said, yes, what are we going to do about that? And
Mm.
it was just a moment where um it was a turning point.
Mm.
And yeah, that's how I ended up here. I think
Mhm.
along the journey, going home then and researching human trafficking, and when I started to learn about it, and what it looks like here locally, that was also another moment for me. And then encountering people in my personal life who have abuse and exploitation in their past, that then when it becomes personal like that,
Mm.
that also is another moment on the journey of, okay, this is something that I'm supposed to use my voice to bring awareness to, and
Mhm.
um, and create pathways where we can see change.
Mhm.
So.
What did that look like for you to just even step in with your yes? Because I can imagine there might have been some potential resistance in being obedient to this call.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm a visionary, and I was young then.
Mhm.
Um, and so I thought that, this will be fun and easy. We'll just make a difference, and everyone will want to do this with me because this is terrible. And why wouldn't you want to do something about this? That was kind of my outlook. This was 12 years ago now. So um, I, at the time, was doing events with some friends of mine. We'd started an LLC, and we were doing youth events and women's events.
Mhm.
And so I came back and wanted to do a anti-human trafficking event, awareness event, and for the church. And we did that. And it's not that it wasn't received well, it was, but not it wasn't received how I thought it would be received. And then moving forward from that, I think my biggest challenge at the beginning was just realizing that the community I was a part of, the Christian community that I was a part of, just they weren't as excited as I thought they would be to join. And there's a lot to that now. I know now. When you talk about human trafficking, you're also talking about pornography, you're talking about sexual addiction, you're talking about um, an age-old crime slash profession of prostitution. And there's a lot there. And I also have learned that this issue of trafficking and exploitation, I really believe that because the church has largely not stepped into it, it's a very dark place, and the enemy has a lot of strongholds there. And I didn't know all that when I started. I didn't think about all that. So yeah, there was definitely opposition, and there was definitely um, a lot of learning, and yeah, yeah.
So when you first got started, it started as an LLC, and now are you still structured as LLC and nonprofit? Is
No,
it?
so at the time I had an LLC with my friends, and we ended up dissolving that. It was like an event planning company. And we so it was my mom and I that co-founded Stories. And for a couple of years, we tried to decide if we should structure as a LLC or as a nonprofit. And we finally decided to go the nonprofit route because the vision way back then was to start a coffee shop. So do we start just a for-profit coffee shop and give our money away to people fighting human trafficking, or do we start a nonprofit coffee shop? Um, and in the time in between, it was 2012 when I learned about human trafficking, and then 2015 when we became a nonprofit, I continued to do conferences, and we did that just, you know, as a kind of a for-profit structure. And then in 2015, we decided to go the nonprofit route, and we filed and got our 501(c)(3) status at that time. So, yeah.
Was that just thinking of maybe somebody who's listening who maybe has a ministry or a nonprofit on their heart? Like, was that process? Some people might think, "Oh, I could never do that." Like, what did that look like for you guys to shift into the nonprofit sector?
Yeah, it can be overwhelming. And I remember being really overwhelmed by the paperwork and the filing. And that's something I like to do now is come alongside people who feel called to start a nonprofit because it doesn't have to be overwhelming. There is a process that you can start with, an easy filing that is more cost effective and not as complicated. And then really the hardest part, I think, is waiting for the IRS to approve you. That can be the hardest part. So, but it was extremely overwhelming. And I remember I had a friend, I'm a visionary, so details aren't my best friend, and I don't love paperwork. And so I remember having a friend come over and just walk through the paperwork with me. And we had to, to start a nonprofit, you have to put a board of directors together, and you have to get your bylaws, and you have to get your articles of incorporation. So there's all those things that have to be put in place. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know all the ins and outs of it, and I just bless anybody who steps through that door to. But I love that you've now walked through it, and you said that you can come on the other side and help people along their journey. So, like, what does that look like if somebody's listening and they're like, "Oh, can I reach out to her then?" Is that what
Yeah,
you're saying?
for
Yeah.
sure. Yep. You can reach out to me, and we do a consult call and see what you need and what it looks like. And I've walked through quite a few women, especially, who are looking at starting a nonprofit. And even if they're looking at the question of, do I want to start a nonprofit, or do I want to start a social enterprise, which might be a for-profit, but has a mission, drive to it? Those are questions that we can walk through, and Yeah.
Oh,
Yep.
awesome. I didn't
Mhm.
know about this part of you. It's amazing. I love that, because that's a lot of our journey is I like to say we pick up keys and revelation along the way, and they're not always going to be keys just for us. They're usually keys for us to help go unlock others, right?
Oh, yes, that is so true. Hmm.
So tell me a little bit more about stories. The name, like what is the essence and the vision, mission for stories?
Yeah. So at Stories Foundation, we believe that every single person has a story and every story has value. And that when we see the value in our own stories and we live them out confidently and we share our stories generously with others, that we will then see stories of injustice change. So it's this idea that we can get overwhelmed by the injustice in our world, and human trafficking can be a really overwhelming, dark topic and issue. But really, um, we all we all have something to contribute, and we can see the value in people around us. And it starts with seeing our own value and seeing how what we've been given, the experiences we've been given, the education we've been given, um, the knowledge we've been given, the gifts we've been given. And when we see the value in what we've been given, and then we choose to share that with those around us, that's where we see change happen in these huge issues um, that are everywhere, and they're really cultural.
Mhm.
We have human trafficking and exploitation because of a lot of things that really impact all of us. And so if we start to understand what's happening and then see the value in what we bring, that's where change happens.
Mhm. Well, and even with your own story, could you share maybe a little bit more about your story? Because, we all have like inner parts of us that, if you're led to, maybe have been interwoven into this, you have a heart of justice, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, it's so fun how God gives us experiences and then develops who we are, and so that we're prepared for what he has for us down the road. And from a young age, I've had this I followed Jesus since I was 10 years old. And in high school, junior high and high school, I really just wanted people to know who he was. And I just had this heart that people would know him for who he really is. I remember being in high school and people would just go to church for confirmation or to get money, or they didn't like church. And I just remember thinking, if you knew Jesus like I did, you would just love him. Like you would just want to spend time with him. And I've always felt that. And when I first started to do anti-human trafficking work, people would say to me, "Oh, I'm so glad you found your passion," and kind of like pat me on the back. And my passion is that people know who God is and that they're changed by him. And I believe that justice work is a pathway for that. I believe that when we as believers, followers of Jesus, when we do this work of first allowing him to make us right, right? That's the gospel. And then we go out into the world and we are about making things right in the world around us. I believe that's where we really meet the heart of God, and we get to see him work right in front of our eyes, and we see him work in us and through us. And so I'm really passionate about that. And I'm passionate about calling the church to that. And so yeah, I think that really characterizes this work for me, is that people matter and justice matters. Making things right matters because that's what Jesus did for us. And that's what he calls us to then do, is to live out the gospel. And that's how we're a witness in the world as believers. So I think that really does drive me. Uh, and And then the things I've done in the past just experientially inform what I do now. So doing missions work, and now, essentially being a little missionary here in my own hometown, which is hard. It's it's what we do. And then doing events and planning, and we do a lot of event planning. I'm a communicator, which has come in really handy. Do a lot of, vision casting and awareness presentations, and and things like that. So definitely the things, even just when we were on the mission field, I would cook 3 meals a day for teams that would come in when I was in my early 20s. I did all the grocery shopping and cooking, and now we're going to try and start a cafe. And, so it's just funny how all these things that you do,
Yeah.
prepare you for what's coming, for sure.
Well, even just going back to, you said you were like saved when you were 10, right?
Mhm.
What did that look like to be that voice in, junior high, high school? I wasn't saved till I was 25 from addiction, and I would have loved to have you in my corner, but I don't know if I would have talked to you because I would feel like no. But
Mhm.
like, what was it well received at that age?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was in a class in high school, and it was actually a speech class.
Mhm.
And um I did PSEO, and I wasn't in at high school a lot. I wanted to not be there. But this was a class I had to took, and it was early in the morning, and I would like roll out of bed, and I would bring my Bible study to my class, and I would, do it when there's free time. And this class was actually the first time I ever got up, and I had to do a 5-minute persuasive speech, and I did it on AIDS orphans and how we should, care and raise money. And I remember I was like a minute in, and the whole class was listening to me. And I wasn't like the cool kid. I mean, I wasn't not cool, but I wasn't super popular. And I was like, oh, wow, everyone's listening to me. I'm good at, like, it was my first time in my life where I'm like, oh, I'm good at this. Like, I'm a communicator. And my teacher in this class, he was the varsity football coach, but he liked me, and he knew that I was a Christian, and I would bring my Bible and my Bible study, and he would ask me questions in front of the whole class about God and faith, and
Mhm.
in like honesty, like not making fun, like he really wanted to know, and I would answer them. Um and the biggest football star in my high school was there, and the all the cool kids were there, and they would all sit around. I remember they would all sit around and like ask me, like we would have conversations about faith in that context. Um and that's something real that really has formed me too, that we can just be ourselves, and we can just share authentically about who we are and who God is to us, and people are hungry for that. They're hungry for that. And my teacher from that class, he supports stories, and it's really cool. It's really cool that the impact that you can have by just being yourself and being authentic. And I just met Jesus in a really, really real way, young, and it really shaped who I was young. And I am thankful for that. Yeah.
What was that experience? Do you mind sharing?
Yeah, I grew up in a Christian home, and my dad was a youth pastor for 30 years, and I was always at church and felt like a know-it-all, and really a prideful little child, actually, if I were to be honest, just kind of knew all the things. And I went to camp at 10 years old, and the speaker that week was a cartoonist, and he drew out the last week of Jesus' life. And the last night was the crucifixion. And I remember feeling sick that night before chapel, and I wasn't going to go. And I remember I was laying in my cabin all by myself, and um, felt like, no, you need to go to chapel. And my cabin they had saved the front row, and there was a seat right for me at the end. They had saved for me. So I went and I sat down, and for the first time in my, 10 years of life, I heard about um, the cross and salvation a million times probably at that point. But for the first time, I saw him drawing out the nails going into Jesus' wrists and the crown of thorns on his head. And I just realized that he did all that for me. Um, and I saw myself for who I was. I'm the oldest of four, and I saw how I hadn't been nice to my siblings. I saw how I had been rude to my parents. Like, I saw myself for what I really was. And then I needed a savior. And I remember thinking, well, if Jesus gave his life for me, what else is there but to give my life for him? And it was just clear. And so I did. I surrendered my life, and it was a real change and a turning point. And for me, I remember being different. Even my mom, we've talked. She's like, "You were different when you came home for camp." I'm like, "Yeah, I met Jesus for real," you know?
I mean, such a blessing to be that young too. Did you have a lot of kids? Even in as 10, I'm thinking back to that age. Gosh, it was so challenging. Um, did you have a lot of good friends that were also, walking the walk?
I had a really good church community growing up. Um, and so I'm very thankful for that. I felt really safe in my church community, and it was like, felt like a family.
Mhm.
Uh, I think that's another thing that has really informed my story is that I really loved church growing up, and church has been my hardest thing as an adult,
Mm,
uh, because um, because the American Christian church is hard sometimes,
yeah.
and um, we want to be comfortable and we want to be in control, and that's not, in my experience, that's not what a life of faith is. It's not comfort or control, it's surrender and, you know, stepping out faith. So,
Mhm.
um, but yes, I do feel like growing up, I had a really good community around me.
Amazing. Well, and the fact that I mean, just look at your story and what you are, have been stepping into and developing and bringing others into. Um, what has been maybe one of the most impactful stories that you've encountered along the way since you started this?
Hmm. There's a survivor that I've worked with, and we're friends, and I'm very, very grateful for her. And she recently we hung out, and she was like, "Steph, I don't want to be a survivor. I don't want to be known as a survivor anymore." And so we
Mhm.
made a list of everything she is. She's an overcomer, and she's a communicator, and she's, all these things. It was like fill the whole whiteboard of things she is. And when I think about her and her story and what she has experienced, she was trafficked from a really young age, by her parents, starting at age 3. Um, and then she was emancipated when she was 16, and then was exploited, and bad boyfriend, and has a son, and I don't know, she's just overcome so much, when everything was against her, and she's just one story of many, and I'm so inspired by women, and what they go through, and then what they rise above, and their tenacity and perseverance and resilience, and then the women that I work with, not only do they stop at overcoming, but then instantly they want to go back, and they want their story to matter, for they want to use it to help others. They're so generous. It's so when people look at me and they're like, "Oh, you're doing this work." I just think it's such a privilege. It's such a privilege to get to walk alongside people, and um I I just am so thankful. I've prayed so much for a front row seat to what God is doing and to his work of redemption. And I really feel honored when I realize I have that. Um, that I really get to see firsthand what God is doing and how he can restore and redeem. And it's a miracle.
It's so his heart,
Mhm.
so his heart. And I'm sure that there's been really challenging times too. Like, what does that look like for you in this journey? Because I always tell people my journey definitely hasn't been rainbows and butterflies, although I love both. There it's like, you have to, I'm very tenacious. I'm sure you are as well. I know you are. But what does that look like in those like more challenging moments, and how do you continue on?
Yeah, no, nothing has gone how I thought it would,
Mhm.
or how I would choose for it to go, honestly.
Say
And
that for the
it
people back.
Yeah, I know. It doesn't go how you think it's gonna, or how even this morning I was at a meeting and someone was sharing about their adoption journey and how they had this perfect picture of how it was gonna go, but then it was different than how it really went. But God changes us on the journey to be the people that that he desires us to be, and it's better. It's better for us. It's better for the work we're called to. We get to become better people. That's sanctification. And but yeah, it's been incredibly challenging. It's been very isolating at times. I've experienced a lot of rejection from people that um you know, I thought were in my corner or would support this work. I mentioned church being hard. You know, the church has not, at the big C church overall, has not been supportive of the work that we do. And that's been really, that's probably been one of my biggest pain points. It's been hard financially. It's been hard uh, because I'm trying to serve a people group that are often undervalued. People don't see a lot of value in women coming out of prostitution. As a society, we don't see value in people like this often. So yeah, it's heartbreaking. Um, it can be heartbreaking. And how do you keep going? Well, you know, perseverance produces character, and character brings hope, and hope does not disappoint, right? That's Romans 5. And uh, people matter, and people are worth fighting for. And um, we don't have enough resources for the marginalized in our society. We have not done a good job at creating a pathway of healing for people. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. It doesn't mean it's impossible. It just means it's hard. And just because something's hard doesn't mean it shouldn't be done. And I'm pretty stubborn. So here we are.
I'm with you, girl. So I know that you have a heart for like collaboration too. I was at a conference where you had others who are, doing this hard work as well. What does that look like for you over the years? Have you had moments where you thought like, oh, there's nobody else out there that I can maybe partner with, but has that shifted? Like, what does that look like in this
Yeah,
journey?
that's a good question. I'm super passionate about collaboration, and I don't believe in competition. But um, so it looks like mm, reaching out and creating the spaces where people can collaborate and come together. And it also looks like recognizing when people aren't in a place to collaborate, and not everybody is. To truly collaborate, you have to trust that God will is the one that prospers you, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Um, to truly collaborate, not that I don't advocate for what we're doing as an organization individually, but I don't need to be the one to defend it or make sure that everyone knows I'm the most important or everyone knows we're so amazing. True collaboration really is about what happens together,
Mhm.
which means you're not elevating yourself. And you know, in our American culture, that's not the default.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
it can be hard to collaborate because
Mhm.
you can't really collaborate with somebody that doesn't want to collaborate, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think there have been times where it's been lonely. But where I'm at now is you just find the people whose heart really does align with yours in that, and then you stick to them, and then you just have an open hand with everybody else.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Have you found that you've had to kind of push on doors in that realm, or has it been just like these God connections in essence where you're like, wow, those moments of you're like, I didn't know you were right in my backyard and here you are.
Yeah, I think I try not to push too hard on doors. I used to do that more, honestly,
Mhm.
because I kind of am the personality where I'll just make something happen. And I've learned that that's not
Mhm.
always the best idea.
Mhm.
So I've learned to just go slow and um, be open-handed, and then you just connect with the people that are in the right time, in the right space for you. And then true collaboration also comes is it's tested. So the people that I'm aligned with now really closely, it's because we've been through it together.
Mhm.
Um, that matters, you know, and you do the hard work of sticking it out and having the hard conversations and, you know, building those relationships. And that's also part of true collaboration, I think.
It's so needed, and we need community, especially when it comes to, as a helper. You're definitely
Mhm.
a helper, and you're out there. Um, I'm a helper in a different way. We need each other. We need people that, whether it's being able to talk to them about different things you're going through, or knowing that there's somebody else out there in a similar field who, maybe it's ideas, or praying for each other, different ways that you can come together. It's not always going out and like going arm in arm together in the work, in essence, right?
Mhm.
um, what do you think on that?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's not always doing the work together. It maybe even more often looks like, how can I pray for you? Or, um, what do you need? Or even just, I really believe in what you're doing. And I just want you to know that I see what you're like, I see you. You
Mhm.
just need those people in your life that say, I see you. I know it's hard. What you're doing really matters. Like, don't give up, like those, we need those people almost as much, if not more than the people that we link arms with and actually are boots on the ground with.
Mm, absolutely. Well, just thinking, we both live in like the Minneapolis area. um, do you have a lot of like connections in the US and then also worldwide? Like, is there a network that you guys are all can kind of plug into with each other?
There are a variety of networks, but no, it's not as I wouldn't say it's as connected as you would think or as one would like.
Mhm.
And there aren't very many of us really.
Cool.
And there's a difference too in maybe people who do more international anti-human trafficking work than local,
Mhm.
and both are important and valuable, but there would be different networks for those. And local anti-human trafficking work, that's where it's more sparse, I guess, and we're not as connected. And especially when we think about people of faith who
Mhm.
do this work.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's definitely room for more connection there.
So, being a visionary, I know that you have a huge vision. Can you tell us about what I like to say? You're kind of like a Noah, right?
I do feel that.
There's a lot of people that I talk to that are like Noahs, and I'm kind of a Noah too. And it's like, I always wonder what Noah's wife would be saying to him. Like, what are you actually doing?
Yeah, right.
What are you
Yeah.
building this? There's no rain, and there hasn't been for a really long time. So, can you tell us a little bit about what you're building behind the scenes?
Yes. Yes. So I at the very beginning of learning about human trafficking, the first idea was to start a coffee shop
Mhm.
that would be a hub for community and awareness, and where the funds would um, go to organizations fighting human trafficking.
Mhm.
And as I began to learn more about human trafficking, I realized that there just aren't a lot of those organizations that exist that are actually doing the work locally. And even since 2020, there's less work being done
Mm.
because it's hard and it's hard to sustain financially. And so this idea of a coffee shop, even as we've created programs around awareness and prevention and survivor support, this idea of having a social impact business that is a place for community and can financially help sustain us through the profit of selling food and coffee and a little boutique hasn't gone away. Still really feel called to that original vision. And so we have been um, working towards building this vision for for 3 years, and it's been really hard and it's been really expensive. And I think people think I'm crazy. Sometimes I wonder if I'm crazy, which is where, I wonder if Noah probably felt that too. Um, but but the need is there. The coffee shop will also be a place that supports survivors through jobs and housing.
Mhm.
And we need all of that. We need community, we need awareness, we need sustainability when it comes to finances, and we need a place for survivors and those vulnerable to go. Um, so there are some things happening where I think we're going to see this vision, this boat, we could call it, right? This arc come to life sooner than later. And I feel hopeful about that. And I feel excited because it's been a dream for a long time.
And like we just have to continue to hold on to the dreams he gives us. And I love the crazy ones.
Thank you for saying that.
Love coming along, and it's not even I just like to say it's almost like, being wild. Like, how many in the Bible did things that were just wild,
Everyone.
that don't make sense? It's like
Yeah.
the don't make sense mission. Like, okay. And how many can we look to for inspiration and encouragement? Because if we look at the world, like the world, the system, it trains you up to do things that make sense. So it's hard to come into these places sometimes, and there is tension in it, right? I mean, am I the only one who feels that?
No,
No.
goodness. So much tension. It's when you're going against the status quo and you're
Mhm.
going against the way things have always been done. And God's ways are not our ways.
Mhm.
God's ways are not human ways. And I think we've gotten lulled into a Christian culture that doesn't always line up with God's word. And so when you come against that because you're being obedient to God, you're going to feel that. You're going to feel that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I've encountered someone I know who was led to take a pretty huge step of faith, and somebody in the church even said, like, God wouldn't have you do that, like, if you didn't have a backup plan. And it's like,
I don't think Abraham
uh,
had a backup plan. I don't think Noah had a backup plan. I don't
I don't
think,
think
I mean,
Abraham had one, Moses, I mean,
faith is being,
Esther, I mean, look at
yeah,
all of them,
faith is being
all
sure
of
of
them.
what you hope for and certain of what you do not see. So
Right.
that's,
They're all there. Hebrews 11, like, go check them out.
yeah, yeah.
It's just like it's a beautiful journey, but there's also just a lot of challenges, and that's where, we need each other. When it comes to, just the work that um, you've been in the background building, and knowing that he's got this, right? The
Mhm.
timeline may not be as quick as we want in our hearts. Um, do you foresee a due date?
Oh man, yeah. I, um, things are happening right now, and I really think within the next year we'll be open. And
Mm,
that feels, I've never been able to say that confidently. And as confident as I feel very hopeful about that is what I'll say. I'm holding it very loosely because I've learned to do that, but I really feel like God is moving and that now's the time. And it's, like I said, it's been a 12-year dream. So, there have been moments where I've thought, is this even going to happen? Like, is this even it? Did I hear right? Like, was at a thing the other day and somebody said, yeah, you've just been really, you're still working towards this. I'm like, yeah, I am still working towards this because it matters. Like, it matters, and it's God gave me a vision,
mhm,
and I believe He'll bring it to pass, and I believe He is bringing it to pass.
mhm.
So I'm excited. Yeah.
Great. How can we support you in that right now? I know that there's an initiative that I love.
Yeah. Yeah. So we did another crazy thing. A couple months ago, we decided to buy a bunch of bracelets, and they say your story matters. And we're selling them to help fund our cafe. So, like I said, we believe every person has a story and every story matters. And we want people to know that they matter and that they can create change right where they're at. We often say, I say, if you want to start a nonprofit, I'll help you. But you don't have to start a nonprofit to make a difference. You just go back to the places you already are, the places you have influence, and you see the people around you differently. You act differently. You're more intentional, and that's how we live our stories generously. And so we want everyone to know they matter, and we want them to be reminded, and we want to spread the message. And we bought a lot of bracelets. So I would like to sell a lot of bracelets. They're $15, and all the profit directly goes to us opening this Give Back Cafe that will support survivors of human trafficking and be a place for awareness and prevention.
So beautiful. Yeah, when I saw the bracelets, I was like, I need one. And then he gave me another idea for them, which is so fun because it actually matches the podcast cover. I was telling you that before we got started. It's just because that's for me too. Like I am such a proponent of people's stories and that they matter. And, testimonies bring so much change. The moment that you even release your testimony for the first time, there's so much breakthrough that can happen. I'm sure you've seen that before, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
When we share story with each other, it's vulnerable. And when we're vulnerable, that's where authentic connection happens.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Also, we can see each other in each other's stories. We see that we're more alike than we are different. Um, Truth comes out when we share story. Um, Competition goes away, comparing goes away, fear can go away. There's so much power in sharing our stories with each other.
Well, even in the women that you've worked with, I guess I'm just kind of curious, has it been challenging for them to share their stories? I know in my own life, growing up in a lot of trauma and just there was such a chokehold on my voice.
Hmm.
Have,
Yeah,
have have you seen that? And then what did it look like for them to even, I like to say, release their sound, release their voice?
yeah, that has been a challenge. First of all, because we don't want to re-exploit someone by expecting them to share their story so that we understand better.
Mm-hmm.
But then also, the women that I work with, most of them want to share their story because they want to help others. But when you share your story, you can get triggered. There are parts of our story that are incredibly painful. Um, and so helping women walk through how to share their story in a way that's honoring to them,
Mm-hmm.
that's where they feel safe. Um, that's been something I've had to learn to do. I remember with a survivor, the first survivor I ever interviewed for our podcast that we have where we share stories. Um, we weren't live, thankfully. We were recording, and we were just a little bit in, and I thought to myself, this was a terrible mistake. What are you doing? She was not anywhere near ready to share her story at that capacity in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so it's a learning curve because we want to value the person above all else. And I always tell survivors too, like, you don't have to share your story. Like, you don't owe anyone
Mm-hmm.
anything, because our stories are personal, and there might be moments for that. And then there are moments for it not to be shared.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's definitely been a journey with that.
So in just even in the aspect of, bringing, the women together in community for like healing, right?
Mhm.
Um, have you noticed when women who come together who have had a similar story and then they can share a story with each other, have you noticed that that is kind of more of a starting ground
Mhm. Mhm.
for breakthrough?
Yeah, and I think just knowing you're not alone,
Mhm.
right? Um, that goes a long way
Mhm. Yeah.
to defeating the lies of uh really a lot of the lies that are battled in this space are lies of unworthiness,
Mhm.
lies of, you know, you're the worst.
Mhm.
Uh, no one will ever want you. No one will ever love you. You're worthless. So when you meet other people who have been told those same things, there's a power that comes to defeating those lies together, I think.
Well, I just love your heart and the work that you are doing, and I hope that listeners have been able to just feel your heart and are able to, take a look at what you're doing, I'll have everything in the show notes for you to be able to connect with Stephanie. First of all, if you have an interest in, a nonprofit, I love that she's willing to come alongside and, bring mentoring or what have you in that realm. Your website and the bracelets, they're amazing because I just love them. But
Thank you.
so my heart, and he told me that this is a seed cast. And I always see that there's one person that's listening. Obviously there's probably more, but as we're just talking, is there anything that you would want to say to this one woman who's listening? Anything else that you'd want to just tell her for open encouragement? And then would you be able to pray over the broadcast as well?
Yes. Yes. What I want to say to to you is that if you think that you don't have value, if you think that your voice doesn't matter, if you think that everything's already been said or everything's already been done, or um, people don't seem to be giving you space, I just want to let you know that what God has put in your heart, the ideas that you have, the vision you have, it's all for such a time as this. You are here on purpose for a purpose, and God will show you one step at a time what He has for you. Uh, and we just need to take the first step. And it's not already been done. What He has for you and what He's given you is for now.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would say. And I would love to pray.
Thank you.
Dear Lord, I thank you for how you're always working around us. And I thank you for this work. And I thank you for how you're rising up, I believe, an army of women who are following you in obedience and doing the unconventional things.
Mm-hmm.
And I pray that our ears will be tuned to your voice and that we will follow in your leading without fear of man or fear of the unknown, but that we will trust you, that you are our backup plan. And I just pray that these words spoken today will find the right hearts, and that you will that people hear your words, not ours, but that you'll speak and lead. And just thank you for this opportunity, and I thank you for all that you're doing, and I'm grateful that we get to be a part of it. Thank you for wanting to partner with us. We love you in your name. Amen.
Thank you again, Stephanie. I'm going to close with our anchoring verse for Hope Unlocked. It's, may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace in believing, so that by the power of the Holy Spirit, you may abound in hope. And that's Romans 15:13. So thank you for being a brave voice who's setting others free. I just encourage those of you who are listening to go do the same. I will be back with another episode next week.